Hi there, Neil from Diagonal Move. We are looking today at Operation Theseus, Gazala 1942, a North African front game published by Vuca Simulations. Now, before I dive into the components overview element of the game, a word of warning. I'm going to be unapologetically gushing about this game because it is a game I've waited for what feels like forever, but has really only been about 6 or 7 months. It's a game that is the latest in a series of games that I absolutely adore. Crossing the Line was the first, followed by Across the Bug River, and for me these games are the perfect mix of playability and historical detail and amazing components. So fair warning when I start waxing lyrical about how amazing I find this series of games. Although interestingly, I don't know what the name of the series is now that I think about it. I'm not even sure if the series does have a name, but suffice to say, it should have one, and it should be a good one. So Operation Theseus then, it's brand new as far as I understand it, certainly new to me. Quick note on the box, we do have this fantastic illustration of tanks from both sides in the North African front, but the reason I want to point out the box particularly is because it does not come cellophane wrapped, and instead it does have this these stickers, which when I first saw I nearly died of horror, but they do peel off really easily with no scuffing on the box. Sadly, my copy does appear to have been slightly bashed in transit, but we can't blame the manufacturer for delivery issues like that, can we? Okay, Operation Theseus then. The situation is, after the Commonwealth offensive Operation Crusader, the Axis overran Syria for a second time and prepared for the capture of Tobruk. If successful, the Axis might have the opportunity to drive to Egypt, perhaps crossing the Nile and reaching Cairo. To prevent this, the British 8th Army established a defensive line consisting of immense minefields and fortified positions, some 43 miles or 70 kilometres in length. And this game is an operational simulation of the battle that followed during 1942 in May and June, intended for 2 players, but is suitable for solitaire and team play. The goal is for the Axis player to hit the Commonwealth forces hard and seize specific victory locations, opening the door to Egypt. The Commonwealth player obviously would rather they didn't do that. So the game contents are 1 rulebook, a mounted map, 383 counters, 4 double-sided player aids, and various other bits and bobs that will help you play the game. The scale is infantry, brigade and regiment and tank battalions. The time scale is 1 to 6 days. Hopefully that's not the time per turn, and the map scale is 2 and a bit miles per hex. The 3 scenarios including the campaign and a playtime ranging from 60 minutes to 10 hours, and the designer there is D. Blennerman. Complexity is a 7 and the solitaire suitability is an 8, and I think I may have palpitations at that complexity level. I'm sure that is higher than other games in the series, but we shall see. Nice little feature here though of the manufacturer, I think they do this in all their games, is they add a timeline of where in history this battle is in relation to everything else, and it's smack bang in the middle of the Second World War. Okay, rulebook. Let's have a look at the rulebook. It is nice shiny paper, same illustration as on the front, with a large contents page and a snapshot, almost a satellite photograph of the region in which the combat is taking place, around the region in Libya. Quite a fair number of things to work through, and obviously if you've played the game before, the game series before, you'll probably pick it up slightly quicker than someone who's brand new to the series. And what I like about this series is that they don't have a separate series rules and exclusive rules. They have just the rules for each game, which is really good because you don't have to keep flicking through hundreds of different sets of rules. But this rulebook is very, very similar to the other 2, pretty much identical in terms of its layout. Interesting new feature in this game is, as mentioned on the back of the box, we do have minefields, and these are represented in the gameplay. Very big feature from my brief skim through the rules earlier. Combat units are nicely listed there. and the counters have a nice description. Counters tend to be nice, easy to see counters, which I'll get into more as I show those. So far, so similar to the remainder of the series. It does look like the stacking limits have changed slightly, with the Axis being able to stack far more units than the Commonwealth, which may be one change. And there does look like there's not many of these red boxes, which across the Blue River highlighted differences, but I think here highlight key points rather than differences to previous games. And my initial thoughts here, having a look at this now in a bit more detail than I was able to earlier, is it's very text heavy, very dense. There are still plenty of illustrations, but I do think they've upped the density of this text here. Regular viewers may know that text heavy rulebooks are my enemy, and one day we will have a little chip that downloads rules into our brains without the need to sift through page after page of single-spaced, two-columned text, but at least we do have those nice clear examples, which are a feature of all the other games in the series, or two of them. So we do have the similar actions to before, but we do now have the breach minefield action, which is the new action. Otherwise we have movement, refit, improved defence, hasty, regular and prepared attacks, and so on, as is a feature of the series, as well as the independent activations and the out of turn sequence activations. I forget the name at the moment. I think it's like a reaction or something. Here's some more detail about the minefields and how the minefields work. Combat is quite involved in this series. There's a fair amount to go through, but I find it really works well. Once you get the hang of it, there's a fair number of steps, but once you get the hang of it, it works really well. Although you need a calculator. Interesting, there seems to be another step: access ground support mission shifts and attack escalation. That seems to be different. Combined arms bonuses. Okay, there's definitely some new bits here. This doesn't seem like a straightforward re-theme of the rule of the game based on the previous two. There's definitely some new bits in here. Okay, cool. And we are hitting page number 25, and we got to the scenarios. 3 scenarios: assault on Bur Hashim, which is a training scenario very similar to the initial scenario in Crossing the Line, in the sense that it's designed for a single person to learn the basics of the rules, particularly the combat rules. Then we have scenario 2, which is the opening phase, recreating the initial stages of the Gazala battles. Apparently can be completed in less than 5 hours and recommended for players with limited playing time on their hands. Depends on your definition of limited time. And then you have scenario 3, which is the main campaign, the Gazala battles. Okay, cool. Tons of victory points. Victory point notes even. Wow, okay, that seems bigger than before as well. I think they've definitely upped the rules on this game. I mean, it's hitting a 7 on that complexity scale. The combat example this page is showing here. But yeah, I think they've definitely upped the difficulty level for sure, or maybe not the difficulty level, that's perhaps the wrong word, but the complexity level. That's my initial impression anyway. I may be wrong, but that's my initial impression. Okay, counter sheets, there are 4, and we start with number 3 because that seems to be the one that I put on top. And we have these are the strength point notes. You have the strength point for the various units, and you place one under each unit in the stack. Improved defense and isolated counters. Oh, these are new. Assigned. So that may be a replacement for the individual formations assigned to different brigades or divisions, but that may be a more generic one. We have the German one there as well. DRM marker, negative DRM marker. as well as a couple of the multiplier tokens. Yeah, that does look like a positive negative DRM marker. Okay, that's interesting. That's new as well, I think. Sheet number 2, here we begin to see the formation track markers, the various divisions that you can activate. We do have Panzer divisions on there and what I believe are Italian divisions as well as what looks like Commonwealth divisions. We have the Northumberland division, the Indian division, the Free French, the First South Africans. Independent activation markers. Okay, again, these seem to be new. No activations. Yeah, there's definitely some new stuff in here. Breached minefield. Cool. Okay. Onto the units themselves, we finally get to the first counter sheet, which is by now, if you're used to the series at least, very familiar unit formations with the kind of really cool imagery of the tanks and the armoured cars and the flak guns, it seems, as well as some of the slightly more familiar, I guess, symbols there. Not quite NATO symbols, or maybe they are a variation of NATO symbols, but the more standard, shall we say, symbols there than some of the illustrations we have. And there are some typical NATO symbols there as well. The German side seem to have this style of symbol, whereas the Commonwealth and the Allied side seem to have the more traditional NATO symbols. The HQ markers there, as well as aircraft. Cool, we do have aircraft in this game. Excellent. Okay, that is definitely different. Okay, and we are now on to the multipliers. Basically what you do is you cross-reference the combat DRM with the level of attack that you've done, and you depending on which column you are, you multiply based on the column, which is a very vague explanation, I know, but I did do a full video on crossing the line some time ago. These look like victory hex markers, which is very cool to have actual markers rather than pre-printed. And these here, or this line and this line at least, appear to be replacements for other games. And then we have markers relating to Tobruk and various other locations, and this little bookmark thing which helps you to do the terrain. You basically place the terrain sheet underneath, the terrain effects chart underneath, and you can read down the rather large table much more easily. I'll show you more about that in a moment when we get to the map, but first, before that, we do have the setup scenario. Scenario 1 setup being small, as you might expect. Axis on one side, what just appears to be just the axis for scenario 1. I think we just have the Free French and the Italian Ariete division there, because the rest of the board is set up for scenario 2 and scenario 3. On the reverse, we do have Allied. Here we have Axis. So that bit at least was correct when I said that. Okay, cool. Tons of little bits of information specific to each unit. And that's what I really like about this game as well, is that their player rates are just wonderful. They're so helpful because everything you need is usually on the play aid, or at least the majority of things. And speaking of play rates, we usually have 2, or at least in previous games we've had 2. And here we are with the 2 here, and you'll get two sets of 2. And you'll have the formation activation, which will determine how many actions you have, your sequence of play, minefield movement check, okay, stacking limits at the end of your activation and retreat, minefield modifiers, breach, DRMs for minefield breaches, awesome. And then here we have the rules laid out in one place without need to read through the rulebook. Excellent. I do appreciate player aids that do that. And then we have that terrain effects chart I was talking about, where you place it along the line and you can slide your bookmark along to get to the appropriate column. Simple things like that really make this series stand out for me. The terrain effects chart itself is here, and then there's further info on the back, including a broken down combat sequence and a armor superiority chart. Cool. Okay, we do have 2 sets of 2, so these next 2 are purely duplicates of what I just showed you. And then we come on to another player aid, which is looks quite untidy, but actually when you get used to it, it's really useful, because this is designed to help solo players keep track of the game, and I'll show you why that is when we get to the board. But in previous games, you would have the formation assignment tracks and the initiative tracks on one on each side of the board, one per player rather than on one edge, and that was a little bit awkward for playing solo. It's doable, but a little bit awkward. And so this track, if you have the space, goes on the side of the board, and you keep track of everything all in one place rather than scattered around the board. So again, another little quality of life thing that's chucked into the box, which just makes all the difference from my point of view. 2 dice, 2 10-sided dice. Now I don't think they're faction-specific colours, but never mind. And then finally the board. Just have to move some of these things out of the way, because I suspect this is quite a big board. It's mounted. And when I struggle with the board here. Okay, there we go. One map of North Africa, currently upside down. Cool. So here we can see most of the map of the region of Libya in which we are interested. It is mounted. It will need a bit of pressing down, as you can probably see. Tobruk is up the top here, and you have various desert terrain types. Some reason, I don't know why, I'm a sucker for these deserty terrain maps. I do seem to find them very appealing. Maybe it's because they're so different to the usual Western Front type maps. I suspect these ones here these hexes are the minefields. We have what looks like mountains, broken or hillier terrain. It's not quite mountains. Little features of interest here, something called Knightsbridge, various ridges, and then what few roads there are up on the north of the map. In the corners, and this is where that solitaire player comes in, we have the Axis forces, some notes for the Axis forces, plus their assignment boxes, whether the air units are available or flown, and then the formation activation tracks. And on this side, at the top, upside down from this point of view, I don't think you can even see it, but upside down we have the similar tracks for the Allied side, and then the turn tracks and game and VP track and so on along the edge here, which works really well, really well when you play the game 2 players, but playing solo is a bit tricky, hence that that solitaire play aid. Okay, I think I have effused enough about this game. I could go on, but I won't. I will bore you no longer. Thank you very much for watching. I'm really looking forward to getting this one to the table, as you may have noticed. But in the meantime, while I go and figure out what's different about this game versus the others, please do click like, subscribe, all that sort of thing, and I will see you next time.